Fucking
Jack.
regular volume.
Am I too loud
Check.
or something?
Is this all right? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Encephalized, a little bit of echo.
I'm in the car using my car stereo phone thing, so
You sound better now than you did this afternoon.
sorry if I'm giving you guys echo off of the...
Actually, no. Actually, it was me. It's my. Yeah, I've got the computer on and my phone because I have to use the computer.
blaming
Isn't
me
that
for
like
your
recording?
problems.
Isn't that like recording 101, Jeff?
I know. I'm managing it. All right. I guess we're on air then. Welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of Parental Dadvisory, aka the Trad Dad Story Hour, aka the 4 Dads of the Dadpocalypse. And a couple other ones. There was Dad Administrative Duties, or From Pepe to Papa. And I think
That one's there. That's terrible.
yeah, these are joke titles, but they actually indicate something, which is that in our broader community, there are a lot of aspiring fathers. There's this kind of shift that's happening because a lot of us are around that age where we kind of enter into true adulthood, which includes fatherhood. But at the same time, there's certainly a popular sentiment among some of us as well, where it's like some of us are feeling like we're not ready to be dads yet, or we're living in such a time of cultural decay and chaos that it's not a good time really to start a family. So these are some of the topics that I think we're going to end up discussing today as a service, I guess, to the rest of the community. And so I guess how this show came about was because we do happen to have a number of dads in our inner circle of our Discord community. And there was one day where there was this discussion about a whole bunch of dad-related topics, I guess. And that's when we decided we should do a show like this.
It tends to come up.
Yeah. Should we do introductions or should we just jump right into it?
I mean, I'm easy either way.
I mean, for brief introductions, we have, there are 4 of us. And interestingly enough, coincidentally enough, we have a father, soon-to-be father of 4. And then we have a father of 3, a father of 2, and myself, a father of 1.
I didn't realize that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So maybe we should begin with the seasoned veteran, Encephalized, soon-to-be father.
Well, yeah, I'm uncephalized. Currently in the middle of a very hectic move with my children and my lovely wife, who's pregnant with our 4th child. Moving from a bluer area to a redder area at the moment. Yeah, I'm here, as AA would say.
Go ahead.
We got to go in order, Jeff.
Well, I guess the big question I want to throw out to you guys is how do you respond to the younger contingent in our circles about not feeling ready to be a father? Or
did you want us to go do that as part of our introduction?
Sure,
I can address that. Do it anyway. It's how I respond to that.
That's more or less what I was going to say.
If you don't play the game, you lose by default. So saying that the board is unfavorable or that you're not ready to play or whatever is just losing. That's my attitude.
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you're never ready. I mean, it's the world is chaotic enough, but having kids is even worse. You don't know what's going to happen. Your best laid plans are thrown aside 7 or 8 or 9 different times.
Yeah.
And you've just got to make the best of it. And you've got to really not compare yourself to anybody else. I'll take the first Jordan Peterson line here in that you got to do your best day to day and don't look outside your immediate circle of influence. Like if I'm looking and seeing, well, somebody's going on vacation 3 times a year, that's not necessarily something I should subscribe to as a father, because your priorities and your values are of your family, not of somebody else's family.
Yes.
And there's this talking point also on the right wing that's, we're supposed to be the ones with the low time preference. So,
right.
We do kind of have to can't just be a talking point. Like some of us do have to live up to that, and be willing to make certain sacrifices for the family.
Yeah, I think there's something to that cuts both ways, because if you do have that low time preference, you're always thinking about, well, am I in the best position I could be to make this decision right now? You're not just thinking, oh, a kid would be fun, so I'm going to pop one out, right? So you fall into this trap of overanalyzing, like, do I have enough money? Do I have enough? Am I situated well enough? And the answer will never be yes, because like Laurentian says, you're never ready. But your priorities and your willingness to do things shift so fundamentally when you become a parent, and when you realize that you're about to become a parent, that it doesn't matter. I mean, you don't want to be a total loser. You should be married and, have a woman who's stable and ready to go on that with you. But like the fact that your finances aren't exactly where you want them to be or anything like that, it's like those things, you'll work them out because you have to for your children.
Something like the pressure of about to have a kid and then being like, I need to get this in order so that I have a house and a way to provide for my family. So, yeah, when we had kids, or our first kid, we were fairly well settled down and everything like that. So we had everything fairly under control, but it's very hard to predict how much kids are going to cost you in both time and energy and that sort of stuff. So just accept that you're not going to know everything and take the leap. Would be my advice.
You might say have a little faith.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's a great kick in the butt.
That has
right?
faith.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm working on that faith thing myself, so I get people who are not as secure in that side of things.
You have to find somebody first, though. I mean, that's step number one, right?
Right, and I think that's another topic that I have in my notes is finding the trad wife, the potential trad wife. A lot of men in our circles are also struggling with that.
That's going to be something that something I tell guys or bitch at these guys about is that the modern woman. Well, she's not going to be a modern woman when she's wifed up. Things are going to change. The person you are at 35 is going to be completely different by the time you're 37 or 25, let alone 30 to 40 in that age bracket and when you have kids. So that person that you're involved with in your life, your marriage partner, things are going to change and adapt as long as your values are aligned in that direction.
Yep.
Multiple times.
And I would say it's much more important to find a partner who is willing to follow you where you lead than it is to find a partner who is already where you think she should be.
Mm. Right, yeah.
You're not just going to find that magical prairie woman. Like, those don't exist anymore. Hardly at all.
Do you guys think there's something to be said about meeting the one early? Because that's kind of the route that I went.
Me too.
I met my wife while she was still in university, before she got corrupted, by like mother and me.
Yeah. Well, I met my wife in high school, so and we've been together since high school. So yes, I would advocate that if you could possibly manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen for me at all. Complete opposite of that.
I don't think there's a correct answer there.
No, I don't think there is either.
If you get lucky and find someone when you're 16 that you can spend the rest of your life with, well, you got lucky. Like,
yeah,
you have to be open to taking that journey with somebody at some time. I think that's maybe the best way to put it. That you may not be ready when you're 35 or 36, but if you're just open to the idea, you can possibly do it. Well, you can do it, and I think that's what we're here to talk about: is that you can do these things. It's possible. Not only is it possible, it's probably the best for your survival to do these things, and your ability to thrive as well, to bring out the best in yourself and what you can do.
Well,
yeah,
where
exactly.
do you guys think a lot of the guys who have this complaint are going wrong then?
Which complaint that they can't find a good woman?
Yeah.
They're scared, and rightfully so.
I'd say
if you're scared. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say more. It's looking for perfection and not settling for good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And along with being scared, if you're as a man, if you're scared, that's gonna show on you. Women are not attracted to frightened men, so you're not gonna be finding the high quality women that way.
Well, I'd say I'd approach it from a legal sense, in that men don't have very much legal power like they used to. So it can affect our decision making and our identity if we don't understand that we're not now where we were 20 or 30 years ago, and how to not shape your behavior to it, but just understand that where you are, where you stand when it comes to your legal standing. Basically, if things go sideways, you could be up against something that you're not prepared for. So I think that's where a lot of the hesitation is with people, and their personal experiences from potentially their parents and the previous generation, which has been heavily influenced by divorce, the prevalence of it.
Yeah, boomers and Gen X have really high divorce rates. I was going to say, I think there's a real MGTOW, that whole sphere, and they will all day talk your ear off about how every marriage is doomed, basically. Yeah. And it's just, that's not reality. Any more than the idea that marriage is just going to be this walk in the park and it'll be happily ever after. That's a fantasy, and the MGTOW, dystopic wasteland of marriage is also a fantasy that they live in. More than half of first marriages actually succeed, don't end in divorce. Especially now, and the rates of divorce are going down. Granted, the rates of marriage are also going down. So you're almost seeing this thing where people who maybe are more dedicated to the idea of marriage are the only ones that are getting married, and so the divorce rates are going down. Maybe, but it's not such a bleak outcome or outlook as a lot of people would like you to believe it is.
And I don't know if there are statistics on this, but it's that big sexual revolution explosion that happened with the hippies. Because nowadays the statistics are showing that millennials are engaging in less sex. So maybe even that whole phenomenon is trending downwards as well. The whole promiscuity phenomenon.
I'd be interested to find out whether married millennials are also following that trend or not. They're such a small subset.
Yeah. Rigomatic, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say so Laurentian's point, I think it comes down to shared ideals, and then knowing your place, and then having someone that you're willing to take a risk on, basically. So not necessarily being risk adverse, but knowing that you can see the relationship going with someone into the future, and having a bit of faith as to what we were saying before.
Yes.
Ultimately, women are taking a big risk today now as well. To put on my lady hat, sometimes, yeah, it does fit. And sometimes women in the relationship have a lot to offer financially now, specifically if they're in a high-end administrative job. There's the risk associated with their involvement as well. So you've got to make yourself the best. You've got to have your stuff together before you're going to find a woman who's willing to take a risk to share those values with you.
Yeah. I think going back to what Jeff was saying earlier with the getting married and finding someone earlier on, if you've known the person for a really long time before getting married, and that, I think that's a lot easier risk assessment to sort of take in mind, because you've known someone for so long. But I suppose in Laurentian and my point of view or perspective, maybe you have to be a bit more open about that, because it's not necessarily known in common between you and your potential partner. So I don't know, and projecting that somehow.
Yeah, the other advantage of meeting earlier on in life is that it's more based on potential. So the woman sees potential in you rather than actually realized, a fully realized career and financial stability. Rather, she's looking for the potential in you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and on that notion of having things in common, the earlier you meet your partner, in my experience, the more you will end up having in common because you've shared more growing up time together. And so you'll end up growing together, becoming adults together, and so you'll have that shared. It's not exactly upbringing, but you bringing yourselves up into adulthood, and that at least for me and my wife, that formed a very seems to be a lasting bond. We've been together for 17 years now, with no signs of degradation, if you will. So
On the flip side, I
What's
think
that?
you actually.
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, sorry, I was interrupting Lauren. Go back to you. But I was going to say, on the flip side, I think you have to be extremely open and almost cut to the chase. If you're on the flip side of that, you got to get a lot of information across in a relatively short amount of time. But it's not necessarily being autistic about it, but to whoever you want to talk to and just be like, nah, all the things. But,
When you're older, you mean?
yeah, I mean, when you're older, or you've not known the person for half your lifetime, sort of thing, it's a little bit different.
Well, there's only so much time in your life that you have to find a partner and have children and all that. So if you're, getting later on in life, you got to get those things out on the table and get them cleared off as business before you waste waste a half year or a year of your life with somebody that you aren't going to be with long term.
Yes, very much so.
Rigomatic,
Yeah,
you have a story to tell in that regard?
Well, not really. I mean, it's more like, so my wife and I dated for just under 2 years before getting married. And I think within the first 6 months, we're like, all right, so we're having kids. All right, cool. But that was very, very upfront. And I'm not sure if that is what other people's relationships have been going forward and that sort of stuff. Where when I was dating other people, I'd sort of broached that subject early on in dating, and usually the girl would be like, all right, yeah, not so interested at the moment. I'd be like, all right, okay. And we're basically done here. So, I mean, it's been blunt to, I don't know if that's to my detriment or not, but what I have with my wife now is working out very well. So, I don't know. Being up front, I think, is very good.
I'd say that's exactly the right approach as a man who, if you know what you are looking for, there's no point wasting time, right?
Yeah. And nowadays we do kind of have this culture of not being able to be upfront about these kinds of things, where everybody's always dancing around certain questions. It's like, when is the right time to ask this?
How about the first 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not the first 5 minutes, but maybe the first hour.
Well, there used to be a time when our grandparents met for the first 5 minutes and then decided if they were going to get married, right?
Or their parents decided for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was advantages to that. My wife started at 0, and now we have 3. So there's a bit of a, I wasn't kind of willing to give up on her. I knew she was probably willing to change her mind once she got settled. And as women tend to do, they tend to change their mind when, for better or for worse, when things get changed, when things get better or things get worse, they change their mind. Or it doesn't even need to be better or worse. They can just change their mind for whatever reason at all. And you just have to be, not object to the good in looking for the perfect. And you're not perfect, they're not perfect. Faith is important. If they check some of the boxes, I mean, maybe you'll make it, maybe you won't. You really don't know, but you've got to make steps to make a commitment. And the 4 of us have done it. I don't think any of us are shining examples of human beings that excel on a top level. I mean, we're
yourself. Come on now.
We're great. We're great guys.
Sir.
We're great guys. But I don't. There's there's flaws about us too. So we have to be very, very forgiving, and a lot of the journey is in my 13 years. I'm catching up to Seth Lies. Is finding those things out on the way and figuring out your path together. And I think talking about divorce, I think when people do get divorced, they've just decided that they don't adhere to those values any longer, or didn't have an idea as to what their values were. I know our pastor was deeply involved in trying to keep us on track and understanding marriage. I don't know how people outside of the church, without guidance in a troubled marriage, maintain it. The church has a tremendous amount of resources in order to keep people, at least in our experience, in order to keep people focused on their marriage. So, but these things do happen in churches and beyond faith, both negatively and positively. So it's just a matter of getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and living life, and don't be taken in by all the things going on around you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For me, one of my priorities, as I was sort of mentioning before, was to have kids and have a relationship and a marriage and that sort of stuff. And I think one of the most refreshing things in dating other people was figuring out, these are my priorities and this is what I want. And for you, random person that is listening to this, you want to have kids and that sort of stuff, make sure that that's your priority rather than anything else. And then I think you'll find it easier to find someone. And then whatever outside of your main priorities, whatever else sort of just falls away. Like it's easier if you have only a couple of things that you're after, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and don't be scared to impose your will on people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if they don't like it, they'll leave. You'll find out that most people don't mind so much.
No, and actions and words are two totally different things.
Yes.
So a question I have is, how do we keep it going? And how do we, because there is a lot of societal pressures. How, we talked about values making us successful. How do we, things are getting crazier from the outside. How do we avoid some of the pitfalls that we're seeing couples or relationships or other dads fall into, whether it's divorce or addiction or whatever it is? What's going on? Why are dads under so much pressure?
I think families are under enormous pressure generally. Dads are feeling their share of that for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd say it comes down to individual situations. For me, I don't feel particular financial pressure at the moment, but certainly other pressures. So I think it's hard to express that to some other random dad. You need kind of a community of dads, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think we could actually refer to a Bronze Age pervert here for a little bit of insight into that, which is that life is the struggle for space. And in modern times, every space that we seem to be able to encounter is own space. And so there's becomes less and less space for kind of everybody, not only dads, but moms and single people, to just kind of have a space where they can feel free to roam in. So the dad comes home from this, factory job or this office job where all day he's being restricted to a cubicle. And then he comes home and, marriage, one of the challenges of marriage is that you're not going to be able to have as much of your own space anymore. And so that just adds on to it. And there's just no release for modern people to kind of find space. And so they resort to things like addiction and then divorce and all of these other seemingly quick paths to kind of free themselves up.
I very much feel that, as my office is the kitchen. at the moment.
Yeah,
that's where I am.
A sustainable balance. I hope that's only temporary for your sake.
At the moment, it is kind of permanent, but we're figuring something out, so we'll see what happens.
My first order of business, once I get this move done, is actually I'm going to build myself a building. I mean, I have to for my work, but it's also very much just to have a place on my property where I can go that is mine, that isn't the rest of the family's.
Yeah,
that is important.
Yeah, I do have the shed. It's not insulated though, so it doesn't really work well in the winter, which we're going into. So
sounds like a dad project.
Yes, and I did look into it, and it's going to be tough to fit out for that at the moment. I'll figure it out. Either that, or we have a 2-story house, and on the second story we could potentially make some more room over some existing area on our house. So we may end up doing something like that. But the kids and my wife are out generally during the day when I'm working from home at the moment, so it kind of works, but it's still a bit strange living in the kitchen, so to speak.
From your voice, I was expecting you to say you were about to start summer.
No. I'm not in Australia. I'm in Canada at the moment. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pardon me while I nose around in your life.
It's totally fine. That's all right. Yeah.
As far as challenges I see coming up, my kids are all my oldest is school age now, and I'm very concerned about how school is going to go from a global political perspective. I'm sure you guys, know what I mean. But
well, that's the problem. Is it is a global political perspective. It has nothing to do with children's education. It has to do with complete indoctrination of certain ideals. And I'm glad you brought that up. But I think there's a blue syrup analogy that I'm pretty white-pilled on.
What do you mean?
Syrup?
A couple of you guys mentioned that your kids are watching Paw Patrol, and I haven't seen Paw Patrol, but it's one of those things where we have to be paranoid about everything that our kids are watching now. It's like, are there subversive messages in this cartoon for 3-year-olds?
And the answer is yes, more than likely.
Probably yes. Yeah. I've stopped my kids from watching several different things that are full of rainbow sparkle unicorn nonsense and just all this stuff. Because if you don't watch them every moment, they'll click onto something, and there's so much out there.
Yeah,
we don't even let them watch that much screen time. But they do get some. Dad's out of the house and mom has to put the baby down for a nap, and the kids have to be quiet for a few minutes. You don't have a lot of options.
Amen. Yeah. Amen to that, brother. Listen, I caught my 2 boys 6 and 9 watching Reservoir Dogs the other day, so I don't know how much I don't know how much they caught of it, but yeah, it's the messages that these guys are going to get through these screens are inappropriate. But the blue syrup idea that I was talking about, that Yarvin has brought up with his kids and how he manages the situation, is that after some time, everything gets covered in blue syrup. When they start in school, this blue syrup is on everything. And the taste of it as you get older, that's all you've tasted your entire life was blue syrup. So you're looking for something different naturally, and offering them something different or having the availability of something different out there is that they can rebel to. Maybe the trad dad's best option.
And then the father sits back and says, "Excellent. This was my plan all along."
Yes, here's the life story of Ernst Junger.
So the advice is actually to give them, enough blue syrup until they get sick of it first, before bringing them to church.
It's the old smoke a carton of cigarettes argument. I'm not sure I buy that works, but
sometimes it does. We don't know if it's going to work, but ultimately we have to have a strategy of some kind. Otherwise, we're just folding the tent and to the liberal hegemony. So you're going to have you can't watch them all the time. The influence of their friends is going to become more and more important, and we won't have control over that. So we're going to have to find a way to manage this, the blue syrup problem, and it's not pouring it on yourself. It's finding a way to give them options or different ideas.
Yeah.
Because these ideas are ultimately very stale at the moment, and they're not very appealing. On top of the fact that they're everywhere to be found. So if you have a little bit of red syrup,
the one appeal that is very strong about it is that all the cool kids are into it.
It's the new smoking.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what all the cool kids are into 10 years from now when it's a bigger issue for my kids.
Yeah, well, yeah. For me, I'm just trying to give as many options as I can. And so, for instance, today I made a trap to catch crayfish out of, and we stuck it in the river, and we're going to go investigate it later today. My son, my oldest, is 4, but the idea is that just trying to give anything else as the alternative to that. And we're also starting to read Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, which is awesome. So, we just started this here. We got him on audiobook. We're on the 3rd book right now, The Horse and His Boy. My 5-year-old is absolutely eating them up. Nice. Yeah, I think this will be our 4th attempt reading Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe. But to be fair, are you reading it to him? Yeah, I'm reading it to him. We started when he was 3, so this may be a bit too much for him then. High concepts for him, yeah. I'm actually doing The Lord of the Rings with my oldest too, in little bits and bobs. I'm reading that one to him. He likes that too, but it's definitely shorter doses are enough. Yeah, that's fair.
So maybe one of the solutions is being a dad to your kids, and maybe taking back some of that space that's been occupied by the social networks or the social institutions, whatever they may be, and start to take them back and bring the kids back into the home under your supervision. Maybe that's a strategy as well. Yeah, that's a big part of the rationale behind this move we're making, is that we're going somewhere where we can be outdoors a lot more of the time of the year. Where I live now is basically too hot to be outside for a good half of the year. And really taking that, and I'm going to be working on our property. So I'll be home, my wife will be home. And just taking that opportunity to spend as much time, bring my oldest kid into the workshop with me, as much as it's safe for him to do so, work in the garden, walk in the woods, kick the kids out to run in the woods, all that stuff, and just get them doing something that's real and in person and local, rather than being on a screen, engaging in this global whatever stuff. Yeah. So I've been doing that a lot as well. Obviously not moving, but working out in the garden and all that, which has been great. The other thing that I'm just finding difficult is other people with that same opinion, at least locally. It's tough to find people as well, so it's hard to bounce ideas off in that on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I'm my experience in dealing with other people is that their opinions and understanding things is probably not to your advantage to even ask. I don't really care for anybody else's opinions about what I'm doing. It's probably got that attitude's probably gotten me into a lot of trouble. But especially when it comes to parenting, it's not something. I'm not looking for a committee to help me raise my kids. If you can help look after them or contribute to how they're being raised, I mean, of course you'll have a say in how it's being done. But if you're not interested in doing any of the dirty work and you just want to see them the other weekend, I mean, or you don't know them at all and I'm bouncing ideas off you, I'm not going to put very much credit into what you're saying. So I wouldn't worry about it, Rick. That's not something that ends up being a problem.
Actually, when I think back to one of the most wholesome times of my childhood, was when I was living in Malaysia, where a couple of my dad's brothers, my uncles, were living in the same neighborhood. And so all of our weekend activities was me with my cousins, and we would always be surrounded by the adults. And that's when none of us really did too much bad stuff. And then a little bit later in life, there kind of became a few problems among different families. There was a few divorces. I actually moved away from my dad. My parents didn't get divorced, but I moved away from my dad when I was 13. And that's when we started to see a lot of the cousins enter into their rebellious teenager phases. And a lot of us got into different sorts of trouble. So
they lost that positive, reinforced, and from multiple angles, male role model, male supervision.
Yeah.
That was keeping them on the right path, right?
Yeah.
I really credit, in my life, I really credit the Boy Scout program with giving that to me in my teenage years. And of course, now the Boy Scouts are basically a hollowed out shell of what they were. But there's other programs, Pathfinders and stuff that are coming up that I'm looking into for my kids. But we had that where I basically had 20 wholesome dad examples to see at any given weekend or any given trip that we were on. I had a lot of really strong, positive men in my teenage years to look up to and say, that's somebody I can imagine growing up to be like.
Yeah, that's
even when I wasn't happy with my dad being a teenager. Wasn't always happy to be using my dad as a role model at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to you guys' points, that's kind of the issue that I'm seeing and trying to head off. So my family is all back in Australia, and my wife's family is out in Ontario, where BC. So it's very hard to have a family connection if your family is not nearby. And so I'm trying to head off that aspect by trying to find other people that are interested in the community around me, or people within the same sort of mindset or similar sort of mindset, to sort of give that role model thing.
Is now a good time to give a quick plug to basket weavers?
Well, we could plug basket weaving, but go weave some baskets out there. But I mean, so Jeff and I met through basket weaving, so that's good. So if you know where Jeff lives, I live relatively close to him. But anyways, that's neither here nor there because we don't share the same suburb or even the same city. So it's good in some ways, but not direct.
It's not Uncle down the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are positives and negatives with that, and just trying to head some of that off. And for me, I did Air Force Cadets, which I'm not sure if any of you guys, if it's even here. I think it's a thing here in Canada. I don't know. Yeah.
I was just about to bring it up. Actually.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, I did Air Force Cadets, so that was great. And I had some of my funnest times throughout sort of high school was going and doing that. So, and that was with a whole bunch of guys and gals. So that was great. I liked it.
Yeah. I found everybody who comes out of that program, in my experience at least, to be very wholesome. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but
anything that takes young people and puts them through difficulties that they have to learn to sort of face together and overcome in the traditional setting is going to produce more wholesome outputs than whatever else is going on around right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's also to a time point as well. So if someone's only been in for 6 months versus someone who's been in there for a couple of years, you're going to get very different results, if that makes sense. Some of the people that went to Air Force Cadets only stayed out in there for a month or 2 months and then left. And they, I don't think, are quite as wholesome as some of the people that stayed in there for a longer time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My cousin uses the kind of hero's journey analogy to it, where the hobbits were friends before the adventure started. The hobbits in Lord of the Rings, but after they completed the hero's journey, they were brothers.
Yeah,
and so it takes that you have to go through something in order to form that lifelong bond.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm trying to emulate in basket weaving. It's not going very well though.
But
I've never been to a basket weave event, but I get the impression that it's still a very incidental, casual kind of gathering, generally speaking.
Yeah, well, it is what you make of it. So, yeah, I don't know.
So right now
Much
we're
like
trying to move
marriage.
it in a more hero's journey direction.
I mean, so our last one we went on was a trail walk sort of thing. And it was all right. It's certainly no climbing Mount Doom or whatever it is in Lord of the Rings and dropping off a ring, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
it's finding these people. For me anyway, it's been finding people who at least have somewhat of a direction of an idea and an analysis of the way things are and what we're actually truly looking at, instead of the messaging that we're getting continually. And what can happen is when you don't have those things assessed, you can get thrown under the bus and you're the scapegoat pretty quick for a lot of problems if you don't really understand as to what's going on. So I guess this is our community center or Rotary Club or whatever you want to call it, Kiwanis Club. We have the opportunity to get together and discuss these ideas without actually having to know each other or live beside each other. So I think we've got a great asset and opportunity in some of these informal organizations online.
And in a way, it's not exactly a good substitute, but in a way, the last 5 years of Me More have been a bit of a hero's journey for us. And some of us have known each other for most of that time. And then I think that's what kind of gives us this bond.
It keeps boggling my mind how long it's been since that first call from the Asian capitalists to form a society.
Yeah.
Do you remember that video that started it all?
Yeah. And here we are, 4 or 5 years later.
Yep. That's changed the complete course of my life, Jeff. Your channel did that. The friend who I have who lives in the town that I'm moving to, I met because of that video.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why we're moving there.
And, maybe that'll serve as the prototype for future, other people in our community's future.
I hope so. I hope people seek out connection in the real world after forming connections online, because ultimately the online connection is only just a tiny fraction of what it's like to have a real live person in your life, no matter what the relationship is. It just can't compare. I mean, like you say, online relationships are good and important, and we're getting a lot of value out of them. But in terms of nourishing your soul, there's just no substitute to being in the same space with somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that ties back to being in the same space with your kids too. I mean, to bring it back to actually talking about fatherhood for a minute, just being near your kids and watching them and making sure they know that you're watching them and talking to them and holding them and helping them with things. And helping your kids learn things has got to be like the number one purpose outside of protecting them from bandits, right? That fathers have, and making sure they have food.
Yeah, absolutely.
Knowledge is ultimately what we're there for.
Yeah.
One thing I want to get to is also, so it's like we play a big role in how our kids develop over time, but also it goes both ways, So one question I want to throw to you guys is, how have your kids influenced you in the way that you've developed?
Okay, for me, it's pushed me to do more things for myself and have a better understanding so I can pass on that information to them. Even if I suck at something, it's better to get better at it with them and show them how to get better at something than just leaving it be or getting someone else to do it. So that's been really good.
That's perfect, and not pretending to be this infallible font of knowledge on all subjects, but actually demonstrating to them that, no, I go through the process of learning and developing myself. There's all kinds of ways that I'm not adequate to whatever task it is, and I'm going to show you how you fix that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
huge. Yeah.
it's humbling in that sense, right?
Yeah, my 5-year-old, I give a lot of examples with my oldest just because he's been through the most, but he's quite good at drawing. He loves to draw, and he's been practicing and getting better. But for a while, he was going through this phase where he couldn't make the picture be what he wanted it to be, and so he wanted to just get angry and give up. And my wife and I both had to tell him a bunch of times and show him, like, no, like, even, my wife is quite a good artist, and she says, I don't make pictures look exactly like they are in my head either, and I've been doing this for 30 years and I'm pretty good at it. And, you just have to keep going, and you'll keep getting better because you're going to keep working on it and keep making mistakes and keep persevering. And instilling that attitude of persevering through mistakes, I think, is one of the most critical things.
The biggest thing for me,
he's getting way better.
The biggest thing for me, for my kids, is just it's slowing me down a little bit, and just being able to make myself take time with them and pay attention and do the little things of feeding them breakfast and putting them to bed at night and everything in between. It's my life's pretty fast paced and hectic, and the gift that they've given me is slowing things down and keeping me on the correct pace and the correct path. I think they've been whether they mean to or not, they're very leading in what they do and what they require.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to echo that, it's like I was really, really caught up in the culture war and how we gotta like start getting our military training down for the Boogaloo, or how are we gonna what happens when Antifa comes for us, right? We gotta stock up on our weapons now. And then after having a kid does kind of put things in perspective, and also it allows you to be more present. And a lot of that other stuff that, I mean, it's a possibility that someday my house will be raided by Antifa thugs, but it's a pretty remote possibility at this point.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn priorities, what's more important right now is kind of the being present in and also learning to appreciate the little things in life and be happy, right? Instead of always being in this constant state of worry about the state of the world, And at the same time,
checking in with things outside, checking in on the world, checking the news, checking the phone, checking the Discord, whatever it is. I found myself over time really catching myself getting into that loop of, I'm going to check this, then I'm going to check that. When my kids are running around, living their little lives, and I'm missing it, and I've had to consciously put that down and just watch them. And if you just watch them for 30 seconds, you'll get totally engrossed in what they're doing. Kids are so fascinating because they're so fascinated by everything, and they're constantly imagining, and like, especially I know Jeff, you only have one, but like, I don't know if you're planning on having more, but it's been amazing as we add children into the household, how quickly the older kids pull them in and just start including them in all of their games and everything they do. And like the interaction between them builds up to the point where there's this incredible little culture growing in my house,
Yeah.
And it's just something to watch and marvel at, because I didn't build that. They're building it themselves as they grow,
Yeah. And that whole other world of like news cycles and Facebook feeds and Twitter debates, that's this kind of like disgusting dopamine loop. That is really utterly
empty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is that dopamine. Exactly. It's a loop, and it never ends. You can run on that wheel forever.
Yeah.
But your kids won't be around forever. They're going to grow up. Oh man, my kids are growing up so fast already. It's crazy. Got to keep having more. So I always have a baby. Babies are cute. Babies are really easy too. Like when they're really little, they don't actually need very much. Older kids are much more complicated. It seems really hard on your first one. Like you're like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping through the night, and they need attention so often. But it's like the things they need are really simple. It's like they need to be changed, they need to be fed, they need to be held and patted and like burped, and they're just not complicated creatures. And you can learn them really well, and you get really good at taking care of them, and then they turn into toddlers, and it's like, oh, what do you need? Why are you just crying for an hour?
My daughter, she's kind of obsessed with gloves. I don't know where she got that from, but she's always running around grabbing gloves and then bringing them to me. And she's like, "You got to put this on right now."
What is she like, 2?
Yeah, she's turning 2 soon.
Yeah, so she's about the same age as my youngest. Yeah, he just turned 2. Yeah, they get their little obsessions. It's funny, and then they try and communicate these things to you in their little tiny baby language, and you just can't
Yeah.
get more than 30% of it.
Yeah, my son was very obsessed with mittens for a long time. Even in summer, he'd want to wear mittens when he'd go outside. Like, it's 30 degrees. You don't need mittens, but all right, I suppose.
Well, in America, you do need mittens at 30 degrees.
Ha 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 ha.
I don't know if you guys had any other notes that you wanted to go through. Rigomatic, you said that you had some notes.
No, this has basically hit everything that I wanted to talk about. So I think we're good, at least for me.
I got one more, which is what's the difference between raising a son and raising a daughter?
Laurentian, you've got both, right?
You guys all have both.
Oh, you got a boy and a girl too?
Yeah.
Okay. My sons are much more, very stereotypically more boisterous and physical than my daughter. My daughter will sit down and play with a doll or some blocks or some little Duplo Legos for you could, if she was alone, you could leave her for 2 hours, and just check in and make sure she's still breathing every few minutes, and she'd be fine. My boys will climb, pull, investigate, disassemble, throw, knock over anything that's not tied down. Especially my youngest, he's a climber and a jumper off of things, and he's 2, so that doesn't always end very well. But just the amount of sheer physical awareness that you need to keep track of my boys is an order of magnitude higher than the physical awareness you need for my little girl. But at the same time, my little girl is much more emotionally sensitive, and she, especially right now, she's 3, and she's just gone through this phase of melting down anytime she's told no to, anytime something doesn't work out, she just has this emotional storm come over her, and it's very different from anything that my older boy went through. So it definitely has been different in my experience so far, and I expect those differences only to get bigger as they get older.
Yeah, I won't argue any of those points as that's biologically recorded as being the difference between men and women. The good thing is that there is a difference in that our youngest girl is a girl, and she plays with the boys most of the time, and she's probably different than other girls in that respect. But yeah, definitely the emotion versus the physical damage. If you have boys, you're going to need insurance on you're going to need added insurance on your property. If you have girls, you're going to need probably more insurance for mental health. So I guess that's the analogy I'll stick with in that it is different. We'll see how they turn out or what happens. I think we're doing a pretty good job, and we'll probably end up with some pretty good kids.
Do you guys approach it differently then? Are you guys more stern with the boys, more easygoing with the girls?
I'd say about the same.
Yeah. My basic approach is that I will expect the same level of behavior out of both of them, but since they react differently to discipline, it takes more or less of certain types of response from me to get what I need out of them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. One of my boys is type A personality, and the other one is the exact opposite. Both are very capable, but at different motivations and attention to detail. But both of them very competent. You have to push and pull 2 different ways, and you just have to learn how to adapt to what the personalities you're given. I don't, a lot of it's nature, a lot of it's nurture, but you definitely have to be able to adapt to both. We're not all equal, I guess, is the best thing to say. Not all the same. Not everybody's the same or has the same environment.
Yeah. And you can say, oh, girls will tend to be more this and boys will tend to be more that, but ultimately your kid is your kid, and they're gonna need what they need, and they're gonna be who they are, and yeah, they'll likely fall into those buckets because most people do. But I don't know that having an approach for girls and an approach for boys, especially when they're younger, is necessarily the way to think about it.
Yeah, again, going back to what you said, is you got to have faith, and It's going to take a lot of perseverance and forgiveness and loyalty and all those traits that we can all talk about how great, how traditional or great our lives are. But, it's really not in our hands. We have to do our best that we can do in order to just make the best of the situation. And forgive yourself, guys, if you're not doing everything you want to be. Just start putting your things together to make it happen that way. And I think we got to be a little more forgiving on ourselves, and have a plan and try and enact it, but take it easy on yourself too. Don't take it too hard.
Yeah, there is this kind of strain of perfectionism that's developed in some of our political communities or some of our ideas. It's like we're very quick to critique whenever there's this slight flaw, and it's like, well, like take AA's Trumptonshire thing for example. It's not the perfect solution, so let's just point out everything wrong with it and then scrap it. Yeah. That's always the easy way. Cynicism is the easy approach, and I guess there's going to be a process where we have to finally rid ourselves of this cynicism and kind of get back to just acknowledging the process, acknowledging that it's not always going to be perfect, but there's a process.
Yeah, and the opposite of cynicism is, well, it's a host of things, but it's attachment and responsibility for and presence with, rather than this. Being cynical is to detach yourself from being involved in something, to say, oh, I always knew it was going to go bad.
Yeah.
That was AA. To continue on that same vein, he had an interesting little talk about how he's concerned that he's never going to be able to throw his Gen X cynicism. He'll always be the eternal Daria. And he was talking about how even when he goes for a walk in the woods, that he can't just sit there and appreciate the beauty of the babbling brook, right? The stream flowing through the woods. He's always sitting there sort of looking at himself, looking at a thing. And I think he really has to get out of that city mindset for a little bit longer than a single afternoon. It has to be a learned habit that takes time to build up, to really be present and just think about where you are and be totally involved with where you are. And that's a habit that so many of us have really underused in the modern world, because we're so distracted and so pulled into different attentions everywhere. Our attention is always being grabbed and pulled and led.
Yeah, to that point, I'm sure as his kids get older, or if he has another kid, and that'll teach him to lose that a little bit, because he's not going to be able to do that and raise children, I don't think.
Well, I hope so. I think some people just don't raise their children well.
They'll lead him to what his priorities are, and as long as I think you're right, as long as he's in the right environment. But if he's keeping himself tuned into those things, it's just you're fighting a tough battle, and I'm as guilty as anybody is myself. I mean, I should be probably parenting right now to my fullest extent. However,
yes.
I do have to do something else other than that. The only other point I'd make before I get back to parenting is something to consider. I don't even want an answer, is how do we stop the process as dads? We've got a lot of responsibility on ourselves, and we put it on and take it on. But how do we stop being scapegoated all the time? How do we stop being the perceived problem in the situation? Whether it's in the schools or whether it's at home, wherever it is, how do we as dads stop being scapegoated into being the cause of the problem and seeing ourselves as more of the solution than the actual problem? That's a rhetorical question, maybe a whole other episode that we can answer it on, but I think that's
a nice thread to pick up next time, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I just take it on the chin and don't think about it. That's what I do, but that's not really fixing anything there.
That's the colonial stiff upper lip, I guess you could say, that we're all trying to do.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, I guess on that note, we're going to end it.
Sounds good to me.
Little
Thanks, guys.
wisdom. always a good place to stop.
All right, I am gonna have to head off.
All right.
I think I'm gonna check on this trap, see if I found any.
I hope you found the front end.
Yes, well, we'll see. See what happens.
Good luck.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, bye, Jeff.